Hey guys, welcome to our MyFreeTaxes training. So MyFreeTaxes is a free file software in partnership with H&R Block and the United Way, and it's for families who are under a certain income limit, and those thresholds are typically similar to the VITA thresholds that we're familiar with, so they serve the same type of demographic. So through VITA, we use TaxSlayer, and that's the software y'all are familiar with. But for situations in which the return would be out of scope per VITA rules, we can't utilize TaxSlayer for those returns. And so in that instance, we would use MyFreeTaxes. So let's talk about a couple different scenarios in which that might happen. So because VITA requires our taxpayers to have their Social Security cards at the site when they're filing with us, oftentimes if a taxpayer has misplaced their Social Security card or lost it, they'll have to go to their local Social Security Administration in order to get a replacement card. And sometimes they won't have that replacement card by the filing date, so they want another means of filing with us. So in that case, we can utilize MyFreeTaxes to do their return, and we won't have that extra VITA requirement of seeing the Social Security card. Now, MyFreeTaxes is a self-preparation tool, so the taxpayer will actually need to be using the laptop and doing the return themselves, but we can assist them since we do have tax law knowledge. So they should be the ones inputting the information, but we can help them with that. Now, another situation in which we might utilize MyFreeTaxes is if the taxpayer comes to the VITA site and they have something that is out of scope for VITA. In that case, because it's out of scope for VITA, we can't do the return in TaxSlayer, so we can undo it in MyFreeTaxes. Now, most of the time when a return is out of scope for us, the reason it's out of scope for us is because it requires an additional form that we haven't had training on. And so if we're doing a taxpayer's return in MyFreeTaxes because it was out of scope for VITA, then we are going to have to do a little bit more research in order to be able to complete those forms for the taxpayer. Now, a situation in which this might happen is if the taxpayer has tax documents, all of which we're able to do as normal, like say they have a W-2, they have some interest income and Social Security benefits, and then they have $700 of foreign tax paid. So we know that the VITA threshold is $300 for the foreign tax credit. Because this taxpayer has $700 of foreign tax paid, they can't file with us per VITA protocol. But they could do their return on MyFreeTaxes and we could help them out with it. However, we would just need to do a little bit more research on how to account for that foreign tax paid that's over $300. So the reason foreign tax paid over $300 is out of scope for us is because it requires the Form 1106. And so we would have to do some more research to figure out how to appropriately file this taxpayer's return. So MyFreeTaxes, the actual software will not be available until January 23rd. So what we're going to look at today is the training software. And so when y'all are actually doing the return with the taxpayer, there should be a button somewhere on the screen, myfreetaxes.com, which takes you to this United Way page. And somewhere in the top right-hand corner, there should be a button that says File Now. Now, when we click File Now, the taxpayer is going to have an email, and they'll need to set up an account. And so they'll set up an account and put in all the information themselves, and we'll assist them with the process. But because we don't have the actual software and we just want to do a training exercise within the MyFreeTaxes training URL, I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So what we'll do is we'll go to Partner Login, and you'll need to create an account. And again, this is just if you're doing a practice return. You'll fill in all the required information, so name, email, password, and then phone and address. And you can say you're working with a VITA site. Confirm that you're not charging any amount to prepare these taxes, and you're confirming that the taxpayer is the one who's actually doing the return. We're just assisting with that tax law knowledge. So I've already created a partner account, so I'm just going to log in. And when you log in, you'll go to Quick Tools, Training, and it'll take you to MyFreeTaxes training. So there's a MyFreeTaxes test site, and you'll click the testing link. It'll redirect you to H&R Block, and the key here is when you create an account with H&R Block, you're only going to be able to do one practice return in H&R Block. So I've already done a practice return, so I'm actually going to need to create another account using a different email. So I'm going to do that right now. So now that I've created an account, I can only prepare one return. And the return that we're going to look at is the Beth Branch return from our basic volunteer presentation. So hopefully you've had a chance to practice this return while you're doing your basic volunteer practice. So we're going to do Beth Branch. I'm going to do in all caps. Oh, just first name. And then it asks how I filed last year's taxes. And so I'm going to say I was using a paid preparer last year. So I'm going to click this option. And it asks what product I used last year to file my return. So I'm going to say I used a paid preparer, not one of those softwares. So you have the option to upload your prior year return. I don't think we're ever going to do this. The taxpayer might have a paper copy of their return, but I think we'll just skip import. And so it's asking for my marital status, whether I am single or married. So I'm going to try to split screen right now so that we can see both the exercise and MyFreeTaxes. We'll see if that works. So you'll definitely want to full screen the video at this point. Okay, so Beth Branch was married, but she got divorced 3 years ago. So she is single. When is her birthday? So we're going to go to the intake interview form. Her birthday is February 19th, 1974. You have a checkbox here if someone is filing on behalf of the taxpayer, in which case they would need power of attorney. Social security number, you can just make this up. Remember not to start with a 9. It asks if I was a student in 2016, and we can find that on the intake interview form. It asks for student status right here on page 1. And Beth is not a student. Can you be claimed on someone else's return? Again, that can also be found on the intake interview form. On line 10, it says, can anyone claim you or your spouse on their tax return? And the answer is no. So Beth is entitled to a personal exemption. Are you legally blind or disabled? That is also a question on the intake interview form. Right here we have totally and permanently disabled and then legally blind, both of which Beth answered no. Were you a U.S. citizen for all of 2016? That question is right up here in the top right corner of the intake interview form. Yes, Beth was. Did you live in the U.S. for more than 6 months in 2016? And we would ask the taxpayer, but again, the taxpayer would be the one who's filling out this on MyFreeTaxes. And we're going to say that Beth lives in Florida. Do you have any dependents? So when we're assisting the taxpayer, we would want to look at our Pub 4012. We're going to follow all of the same processes that we do with VITA, using the Pub 4012 to determine filing status and dependency, even though the purpose of MyFreeTaxes is to assist the taxpayer in a way that they don't have to have a tax law background. But we're still going to use the Pub 4012. And so we have Beth here listing that Jeff, her son, lived with her, and Sophia, her parent, lived with her. And if you remember from our interview notes, it says Beth's mother, Sophia, she lives with her full time, but even though Sophia doesn't have any income, she's very wealthy and provided all of her own support. When we're looking at our qualifying relative chart and we see that Beth does not provide more than half of Sophia's support, we know that Sophia cannot be claimed as a dependent. Now for Jeff, we're going to look and see he's under 19, he's a U.S. citizen, he's single, he lives with her all 12 months of the tax year, and then I believe it also says that Beth provides 100% of Jeff's support. So she can claim Jeff as a qualifying child. So we're going to say yes, she has dependents. And so it tells us what the taxpayer might be able to claim. So the child tax credit, child independent care credit, earned income credit. So it gives a little background information to the taxpayer. We're going to add a dependent. And so we'll go back to our intake interview form. And it says, do any of these situations apply? He or she lived with me all of 2016, and he lives with her all 12 months. It also kind of hints at temporary absences, so if the potential dependent were away at university, then you would still say the dependent lives with you because it's just considered a temporary absence for education. So it kind of helps the taxpayer out. Jeff is a U.S. citizen. He is not married. Jeff did not provide more than half of his own living expenses. He has a social security number, not an ITIN. He is not permanently and totally disabled. So we're just going to leave these first two boxes checked and click next. And then it's going to ask us some clarifying questions just to make sure that Beth can claim Jeff. So did Jeff live with his or her parent or another parent for more than 6 months in 2016? Or his or her other parent or another person. So Jeff lived with Beth all 12 months, so he didn't live with another person. So congratulations, you can claim Jeff. So we've added all of our dependents. And now it's going to verify Beth's filing status. So again, we want to use our Pub 4012 just to ensure that the software is pulling this through accurately. But it should ask all the necessary questions in order to determine Beth's filing status. So it asks if she paid more than half of the household expenses. And we have in our interview notes, Beth pays all of the household expenses. So yes. And so it determines that her filing status is head of household. Click yes. Next. Asks about Beth's occupation. We see her occupation on box 5 of the intake interview form. She's a cashier. There are some check boxes. Those do not apply though. Now it asks if she has a W-2 from an employer, and we'll say yes. And you can upload a file, take a picture with a mobile device, but for security's sake, we're going to enter manually. And we're going to go to Beth's first W-2, which is from Target. Now this bit is a little bit longer than it will take in TaxSlayer because it doesn't auto-populate. I'm not sure if the actual MyFreeTaxes software does auto-populate. This is just the training, so I'm not sure. But we're going to say that Beth lives in Tallahassee, Florida. So we'll say and so notice that we haven't yet entered in Beth's address anywhere, and it's actually going to take the address from the W-2 that we populate. So that's a little bit different from TaxSlayer. It also doesn't auto-populate any amounts, which I kind of like. There's less room for overlooking a box that you do need to edit after it's been auto-populated. It also tells you what each code in box 12 indicates, which is handy. And so that's our first W-2. It asks us whether it's a corrected, non-standard W-2, but this is just a standard W-2. And then because this is just a fake exercise, it is giving us a warning that it looks like our Social Security wages or tax withheld might be incorrect, but it's correct. And so we can add a new W-2 for her second W-2, which is from Whole Foods. We'll do the same thing. So this time it pulled through her address from the last W-2. We just want to verify that that's correct. It looks correct. Just have that other state information down at the bottom. Again, this is just a standard W-2. Gives us the warning that it think it might be incorrect, but we know it's correct, so we'll click continue, and we'll click next. It'll just ask us if everything looks okay. So this is Beth's personal information, and it pulled through her address from the first W-2 that we entered, and that looks correct. So it asks for contact information, and this will text the taxpayer updates about their return if they would like. I think it'll let you proceed without entering anything. Oh, it looks like that's required. So we will have to enter in a phone number. This is at the top of page 1 of the intake interview form. You can also just ask the taxpayer, but they'll be filling this out. It asks where we live, so because our address is Florida, it's asking us if that's where we lived on the last day of the year, and yes, Beth did. Then it asks if Beth lived there all year, so it's determining whether or not she's a full year or a part year resident, but she lived in Florida all year. Did you earn money in any other states besides Florida? Beth did not. So because Florida does not have state income tax, it's trying to see if Beth might need to file for another state return. But because she just lived in Florida all year and they don't have state income tax, then she'll only need to do a federal return. Asks if she has any foreign accounts or assets, and no. But if the taxpayer is unsure, you can click this little link. What does this include? It'll give you a breakdown. Then it asks any other income you need to tell us about. And so we look at Beth's tax documents and we see she has some interest, some dividends. So yes, she does have more income. And then it gives us some common income examples. So the first thing we get to is a 1099 INT. So we're going to click interest. And we should select all that applied. So we're going to go down and make sure that she doesn't have a state and local tax refund, no retirement, no self-employment. And she doesn't, just that 1099 INT. So it gives us a summary again of the W-2s. We'll click next. Do you need to tell us about any additional income? So this 1099 INT, we're going to add the new 1099 INT. It asks our financial institution. This is from Regions. So we're going to say other. Regions Bank. And we're going to enter in as we see it on our tax document. Do you need to tell us about any additional income? Yes, we have some dividends. So it gives us a whole long list of other types of income. We're going to click this interest and dividends one to add and visit the dividends topic. There's more income, so we're going to click that we have more. And we want to enter in a 1099-G for unemployment compensation. Our next document is our Social Security benefit statement. So it keeps just summarizing all the income that we enter in, and we keep answering yes that we have additional income. So here's the line for Social Security. Note that in TaxSlayer, we're not normally entering in an amounts from box 3, but in MyFreeTaxes we are. We're also entering in the net benefits from box 5. And then we have some gambling winnings. And that's going to be in less common income down at the bottom. Asking if it's a non-standard W-2G that has been handwritten or altered. No, it's just a standard W-2G. Verify the taxpayer's address. So now we've entered in all of our income. I'm just going to go back to our interview notes, make sure there's nothing that we're missing. So we got the 2 W-2s, we got the interest, dividend, unemployment, and Social Security. And the other information we have is in regards to the daycare that Beth pays for Jeff. So I think we're done with income, so we're going to say, no, I'm done. Do you have any foreign accounts or assets? No, Beth doesn't. Gives us a summary of our total income. So this should be the same as the amount that would pull through to line 22 of our 1040. If we need to go back and edit anything, we can. We can also get an explanation of the amount. Click Next. And now they ask us about our deductions. So select any of these that apply to us, but Beth doesn't have any of these, so we're just going to click Next. And these are a bunch of different adjustments and deductions that Beth might be able to take. So we look through, we don't see anything that applies to Beth. So we're going to say we're finished. It says we've entered no deductions. And so we're going to say we're done. And it tells us that the standard deduction for head of household will be our best option. So we didn't list anything that we might have itemized. Click Next. It's going to tell us the adjustment that automatically pulled through for us. TaxSlayer does the exact same thing, so pulled through that early withdrawal adjustment. Then it tells us our standard deduction for head of household. All looks good, so we're going to click Next. And now it's going to ask us about some credits. So we'll click Next. And select any that applied to us. So we know that Beth paid for Jeff to go to daycare on Mondays and Tuesdays while she works. So we're going to click Child Independent Care Expenses. And so it tells us all the eligibility requirements that we must meet in order to claim this credit. So really handy, you don't have to consult our resources, it just breaks it down for us. And so it asks us how we want to enter in this credit. We can use an assistant. We can enter the expenses because we already know we qualify. And so because we've already screened Beth, we know she qualifies for this credit. We're just going to enter in the expenses. So we'll click Next because this does apply to Jeff. And we're going to add the provider. So it says she pays Woodlawn Daycare, which is a business, not an individual. And now we're going to enter the amount of qualified expenses. So it says she paid them $1,000 for all of the tax year. And we'll click Next. So it's just making sure that none of these apply to us. So I used the 2015 dependent care benefit in 2016 during the plan's grace period, not applicable. And then I didn't use all of my 2016 dependent care benefits in 2016, not applicable. So it tells us the amount of the credit that we get is $310. It goes ahead and tells us that Beth also qualifies for the child tax credit. She's getting the refundable portion as the additional child tax credit, and she's getting the full amount. So Jeff's under 17 and meets all the other eligibility requirements. So that pulls through automatically. And then it's also telling us that Beth qualifies for the earned income credit. Here we note whether or not she had an earlier EIC violation and needs to reapply, or if she doesn't want to claim Jeff for the EIC. Or if she wants to claim the EIC for a non-dependent child who is on the return. Again, all of these can be given further explanation if you just click on the links next to them. It's asking us about the Savers credit, which I believe they're using for the name the Retirement Savings Contribution Credit. And so we know on Beth's W-2, she had a code indicating that she's contributing to a retirement account. It's this code D on her Target W-2. So because she's contributing, she seems to qualify for the Retirement Savings Contribution Credit. We just need to know if she took any distributions from that retirement savings account. And so we're just going to answer these questions. Did you withdraw money from any of these accounts? And she did not withdraw any retirement money. So we're going to answer no. So it automatically pulls through that code D, $500 of her contribution, and then there's no other information we need to enter. So again, it tells us the amount of our retirement savings contribution credit. And then it gives us a summary of our credits that we took. Do you need to tell us about any additional credits? No, I'm done. And so now it's giving us another summary page of all those credits. And we'll click next. So it's bringing us to the healthcare section. And let's go back to our interview notes to read about their health insurance situation. It says, Beth and Jeff were both covered by health insurance offered by her employer for all months of the year. Okay. It brought us to common tax, penalty, or payment items. Doesn't look like any of those apply. We're going to start answering the health insurance questions. So everyone in Beth's household was covered all year. What kind of insurance did your household have? She had health insurance through her employer, and so did Jeff. So it says you're covered, you avoided a shared responsibility payment. So she had MEC all year. And then it asks if we need to tell about any additional taxes, penalties, or payments, and we're done. Then it just gives us an overview of all of that. So it's wrapping up our federal taxes. It's going to ask us if we need an IP PIN because we've been the victim of identity theft, if we want to make future estimated tax payments, any new address information. So none of these apply to Beth. This is where a taxpayer can decide if they want to contribute $3 to the presidential election campaign fund. But none of these are applicable. So we're going to click next. So they're going to do a little quick check, make sure everything looks like it's accurate. And then if a state return needs to be filled out, they would prompt you to do so. It's doing an accuracy review for us. And it says, our return is issue-free and ready for file. And then it's going to give us a summary of everything. So it looks like our refund is $6,754. If we needed to do a state return, it would prompt us to do so next. Let's see what it does when we click next. It says, great news, you don't need to file a Florida return, and that's because Florida doesn't have state income tax. So if you're in South Carolina, it would prompt you to fill out the SC 1040. And then if you're in Tennessee, you would get a same message as this, unless you had income from another state like Mississippi or Alabama. So do you need to prepare any state returns? No. It should do a final accuracy review for us. Everything looks great. So just to recap why we're using MyFreeTaxes, we're doing it in situations in which the taxpayer's scenario is not in scope for VITA. So because VITA has certain limitations, there are tax topics that we're not able to do in the software, but we still want to help taxpayers who are under a certain income limit. So we have the option to assist them with MyFreeTaxes. Sometimes when we inform taxpayers about MyFreeTaxes, they want to go home and do it on their own. They didn't even know it was an option. So that's something that might also happen. Remember, it is a self-preparation tool, so the taxpayer will be entering all the information themselves. They can do that on our Save First laptops, and we can assist them with our tax law knowledge. I should mention that While we do want to help as many taxpayers as we can, so MyFreeTaxes is a great option, we do want to prioritize the taxpayers that we're able to help on TaxSlayer. So if it looks like we can't help a taxpayer through TaxSlayer and we have to resort to MyFreeTaxes, we might want to reschedule them for a less busy time, maybe once it's the first week of March or so and tax season is kind of winding down so our sites aren't as busy. That would be a good time to then turn to MyFreeTaxes. Again, we're just using the training software right now, so you're only able to do one return in the training software, and you do that through the partner login. And if y'all have any other questions about MyFreeTaxes, feel free to email me.